Today on Work in Process, Matt and I talk about spring and fall as the shoulder seasons of the year and the stresses that it puts on your indoor air quality and the stresses it puts on the durability and survivability of your house.
And shoulder seasons are tough, aren't they, Tim? They're not the same as the peak of the winter or the peak of the summer. What do our houses experience in the shoulder seasons?
One of the implications is that because the temperatures are temperate, right? They're not really cold, they're not really hot. The mechanical equipment in our house, the air conditioning equipment, doesn't necessarily need to try to adjust the temperature because the comfort temperature that we need on the inside is similar to what it is on the outside in shoulder seasons.
Right.
So we don't rely on our air conditioning equipment to help purify the air or treat the air, right? And so there are a lot of implications to that. And as the humidity rises and it becomes more uncomfortable inside, we need ways to mitigate that and manage it well.
Yeah, this is a tough season, Tim. The other thing about spring break in Texas, which is really interesting, is man, this is an allergy season.
Right.
I have a dust allergy and I have a bit of a pollen allergy.
Me too.
Like my wife got some fresh flowers the other day. I walked by the flowers and I sneezed and she's like, "You're allergic to that flower thing that I bought." And I was like, "Yeah." So here's a crazy story that's typical for us spring break time of year. I washed and waxed my new Land Cruiser the other day. I have a 20-year-old Cruiser I bought, first black vehicle I've ever owned. And I did all this time and effort to wax the hood, put a good coat of wax on it for the first time. It looked beautiful when I went to bed on Sunday. Monday morning, I wake up and the hood is not black anymore. It's like light green.
Yeah.
All the pollen from the trees landed on the hood, so much so that I could write on the hood and with my finger, "Do houses need to breathe?" ? And I was thinking to myself, all this pollen on this hood, if I would have had a traditional built house that was, 3 or 5 ACH50, which is a nerdy term to say, tight, but not super tight, all that pollen would have leaked in around my windows and doors and would have leaked in through the vents in my attic and underneath the base plate on my framing to concrete connection. All these places that have just a little bit of air leakage, that air would have brought with it that pollen, and I probably would have not slept well in my house that night.
No, I can tell you that my house, which was built in the mid-'80s, for years, it was built to the mid-'80s standards, which probably would have had an ACH 50 of 20 or 30 at that time, which would have been a standard, right? I remember my wife and I used to have to dust the house and vacuum the house twice a week.
Yeah.
Right? And you could see the layers. You could see the dust floating in the air when the sun would shine through.
Yeah, that's right.
And that's not just common dust. That's allergens from outside. That's everything that's outside is inside.
A lot of insulation from your attic leaking down in.
That's right. And so since then, I've done 3 or 4 mitigating measures to overcome that. And I can tell you that we could go 2 weeks now, maybe 3 weeks without dusting, and it really wouldn't have any accumulation. So we are making it tighter.
Yeah, we made some videos on that too, which was kind of fun. Thanks for letting us use your house as a experiment.
Yeah,
we did insulation 2.0 at your house,
right?
As the video is titled.
Right, it's been very successful. Yeah, but I mean, the point being that as we've done that, I've had to upgrade the mechanical equipment inside the house and the filter systems inside the house to help manage the tighter house.
Yep.
Certainly the ventilation, I've done some extra ventilation measures as well. So the bottom line is, as we manage the tightness of our houses, which we need to do to keep the bad stuff out, we also need to get the bad stuff that we create in the house out and filter the exchange between in and out.
The other thing we need to talk about too, Tim, is the change in the weather. It's typically rainier in the spring and in the shoulder seasons than it is in the dead summer, or maybe not necessarily dead winter, but we typically have a rainy spring and sometimes we have a rainy fall.
Right.
We also get some crazy humidity here in these shoulder seasons. And back to your point earlier about our equipment not running as much, if you have a V8 engine to cool or heat your house, but it's not super hot outside or not super cold, you don't need the V8 engine, or your engine just runs for short periods of time.
Right.
Which means we're not getting as much filtration from our system. We're not getting a whole lot of dehumidification because the AC needs to run for at least 10 to 15 minutes before the coil is cold enough to have water accumulate on the coil. And then remember, if the water is accumulated on the coil but then stops running, that water will evaporate into the air, and we actually didn't create any dehumidification. So we've got this really tough season for a house when it comes to spring break.
Yeah, and people create a lot of humidity through bathing and cooking. And if our air tightness is what it should be in modern homes, then that's not being removed just by air conditioning equipment all the time, especially if it's, as you say, not running very often.
Yeah.
And so maybe we need supplemental dehumidification equipment. And it's,
right.
If you have an older home, you can get standalone dehumidification equipment. Just sits in the corner of a room. Works great.
Right. $300 plug-in model.
Right. Or you could retrofit a dehumidifier up in your attic as part of the system itself. Those work really well. But it makes a huge difference in the health and comfort of the indoor air quality.
Yeah, it does. No doubt about it. Now, Tim, let's switch gears and talk about maintenance in the spring. What do we need to think about when it comes to, what do we need to do spring and fall, for that matter, shoulder seasons when it comes to maintenance?
Well, certainly manage all of the mechanical equipment in the house. Change all of your filters. Clean out your condensate drain lines because they have a tendency to build up muck and mildew and algae that clogs them up.
Yep.
They're going to put out a lot more condensation in those seasons. And so you got to make sure the drains are flowing well. And then this peripheral things. Make sure your gutters are clean so you don't get any back leakage from water backing up on your roof eaves. Make sure that the drainage around your house as well so you don't get any overflow, and leaking through your bottom plates.
Yep.
A lot of just common maintenance practices twice a year, spring and fall is a great time to do it.
What do you think about spot filtration, Tim? What's your recommendation for homeowners, general contractors about doing more than just your furnace filter? Do you get the question?
I do. I would like to say, though, that if you have a good filtration system on your air conditioning and furnace, one option is just to run it continuously on low, right? And most newer systems, when they need to run at a higher speed, they will. They'll ramp up and run at that higher speed to actually cool or heat as needed. But when they cycle off the heating or cooling, they'll start running at a lower and then continue to filter air on an ongoing basis.
Yeah.
Supplemental to that, sure, it makes a great idea to have an air purifier in like your sleeping area.
Yeah, that's what I do.
Or maybe your cooking area to get those pollutants out, whether they're allergens or cooking pollution. Those things generally work great for supplemental filtration.
Let me add one caveat on the fan on setting for your furnace. If you have supplemental dehumidification, fan on is no big deal because your dehumidifier can kick on and dehumidify if necessary.
Right.
But if you don't have that, you got a 10, 15, 20-year-old system, there's no dehumidifier in the house, fan on can actually be detrimental to your humidity control because your coil might get really cold and have condensation on it.
Right.
But then the coil turns off because the temperature has been satisfied, and the fan will blow and rehumidify that.
It's pulling that moisture back off the coil.
Pulling that moisture back off the coil, exactly. So
right.
If you don't have supplemental dehumidification, you're actually better off with auto mode than you are on mode with your fan, correct?
That's right.
Yeah. So this is a little bit
nuanced.
A little bit nuanced. That's right. Subject to change potentially.
Yep.
Is there anything else when it comes to spring or fall maintenance that you think people need to be thinking about besides filters, HVAC, some of that kind of stuff?
We're always tempted to keep or open our windows and doors when the temperature outside's nice, and we want that fresh air.
Yep.
But understand there's a trade-off when we do that,
Yep.
right? And we're allowing the indoor to become the outdoor.
Yeah.
And for certain days that might be okay, but as long as you understand that can be detrimental, and I certainly wouldn't do it for a long period of time. Many years ago, maybe we were climatized or adjusted to that, and allergens were not as big a problem. And I think people used to brag about sleeping out on a screen porch or leaving the doors and windows open all the time. I remember almost all doors used to have screens on them, so people could leave those open.
Yeah, that's right.
And I just remember when I was a kid, people didn't seem to have reactions to allergens as severely as they do now.
Oh, that's interesting.
I don't know what that is or what the phenomenon is that might cause that, but certainly I think everybody has to adjust their living habits based on their own health and sensitivities. I just know that
So your hypothesis is we're more sensitive today than we were 20 or 30 years ago.
I know I am, and my family seems to be.
I wonder if that's because we're seeing less assault on our system on a daily basis. As a quick, for example, my wife's a physician, and when my daughter was born, they said, "Oh, don't let the kids have any peanuts for the first 2 years of their life," or some version of that. I can't remember the exact scenario. Well, Olivia has a pretty severe peanut allergy.
Yeah.
And the physician community has walked back that advice now. Don't take this as advice for your kids. Please look this up to make sure I'm correct. But there's some version of, actually, they should be exposed to some things at a young age, because the physician, one of the doctors we talked to, or one of the allergists we talked to, said, it's because Olivia had no exposure to that for this period of time in her life. Now she's real sensitive. And actually, it would have been better if she would have had some exposure to peanuts or honey, or I can't remember what all the things are. But it does make me wonder, are we living in such a sterile box these days with kids that get outside less, that now our bodies aren't used to some of the allergens that maybe didn't bother us in the past because we had more exposure to them on a regular basis?
And it could be some degree of environmental change too.
True.
I mean, I'm not ever proposing that climate change is something that's a topic we need to discuss, but I do believe, that I experience more severe climate variations today than I did when I was 20.
Yep.
Right?
Yep.
50 years ago. So
True.
I would say that if that is in fact the case, whether it's a natural phenomenon that just happens cyclically or whether there's some other reason for it, whatever, it is a fact that it's happening. And with extreme differences in climates, certainly you're going to get extreme plant and allergen responses to that, right?
Yeah.
We may have had a more even distribution of allergens in the air 50 years ago, but today it may swing just like the climate does. The allergens may swing more also.
Yeah, that's right.
So, we're getting in the weeds here.
Yeah.
But
Yeah.
I think it's an interesting topic.
For sure.
Yeah.
Let's close with one other maintenance / spring thing that I think is worth talking about. Springtime, we usually get a lot of storms. Like we had a storm here in Austin that was, an inch rainstorm over an hour or two not long ago. I can't remember if it was last weekend or weekend prior. But I like to get outside in my big raincoat or my umbrella during a big storm and take a look and see how the house is performing. I realized the other day that I was missing I basically had a clogged French drain, and I was getting massive pooling water in one section of my house because the water wasn't able to get into the drain and flow away.
Right.
And it was enough that I was like, gosh, if we would have had another inch or two of rain, I might have had a flood on that low corner of my house. And not necessarily at my house, but I've seen plenty of houses where you're like, gosh, I didn't realize that this whole side of my house was getting soaked when it rains. Maybe I should add a gutter here. Or do I have splash blocks that are getting that water away from my in-ground foundation? It's really wise to go out during a pretty decent rainstorm, especially with some wind involved. Look at what's getting wet on the house and see, hey, are there things that I could be doing? Do I have gutters that are clogged? Do I need screens on these gutters? Do I need to add gutters? Do I need to pipe things away? Do I need to add a French drain? Because it's that extreme weather when houses take a beating.
It is. And contouring your grade so that the drainage is away from the house, aggressively away from the house, preferably, because if it's not, one, of course, you can flood your house. But second, ponding water or concentrations of lots of water around your foundation are horrible for your foundation.
That's right.
That stress
Yep.
from overly damp soil on one side and drier soil on another side can exert enough pressure, upward pressure or downward pressure on your foundation to make it fail.
That's right. Yeah. Especially here in Texas where we've got expansive clays and neighborhoods with really bad soil.
Right.
Yeah, that's for sure. Tim, why don't you give us the takeaways? Give us the kind of wrap up on today's podcast.
Well, I think it's important that everyone, whether you're building a house or whether you are living in a house for long term, keep these things in mind about the variance from season to season and the stresses that your house exhibit and the indoor environment present. And manage that. Put it on your calendars.
Yep.
You know, in March, think about doing these things.
Yep.
Think about the things that the house is going to experience during these next few months that it's not necessarily experiencing in other months.
Yeah, that's right.
And manage that. Prepare for it. Adapt to it. Maintain to it. All those things that are just part of being a good, responsible homeowner. And secondly, a responsible steward of your family's health, because that's important. Everybody uses their home as their safe haven, their comfortable environment to enjoy their life and their family experience together. You know, why not take that extra step to make it the best experience possible?
Yeah, that's right, for sure. Tim, thanks for having me on the podcast, man. Always good to be here.
It's always great to have you, Matt. Thanks.